Hey, in this episode, I'm sitting down with photographer Martin Bailey. We're going to be talking about how to diversify your income. This is TWiP. All right, folks. So, one of the issues that plagues most photographers, when they decide to make a business out of photography, is the lack of money that shows up when you're doing this stuff. But there's a relatively easy, I don't want to say fix, but there's a direction that you can go in to kind of ensure that not so as not to put all your eggs in one basket. Martin Bailey is here to talk about that. He and I are going to discuss that a little bit and give some concrete examples of how he is diversifying his income. Martin, welcome, man. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Frederick. It's nice to be back. It's been a couple of days?
Since we last talked. Like, what's going on? Yeah. I love it. I know. We always have such a great conversation, though.
Absolutely.
So before we kick it off, just for the folks that may not know who Martin Bailey is, you're the godfather of podcasting in many ways. Your podcast outdates TWiP and probably many others out there on the internet. Give us the Martin Bailey elevator pitch.
Yeah, well, I started my podcast back in September 2005, and there was only two others. There was Chris Marquardt's Tips from the Top Floor, and Brooks Jensen's Lenswork podcast were the only two in iTunes at the time. So I jumped on pretty early. But yeah, it's been a wild, coming up to 13 years, 12 and a half years now. I was able to basically remove myself from my corporate. Used to work for a Florida-based IT-related company. Had a great time working for them. I really did enjoy it, but I built up my business in the background as I was working for those guys and cut the cord in 2010, having built a relatively large following online and enough of a social footprint to start filling photography tours. And then, we're going to talk about some of the other stuff that I'm into now, but it really has been about diversifying and trying to find as many ways to create passive income as possible.
Yeah, and that's the key right there: diversification and passive income. And those are the two key phrases I want to talk about in this interview. One of the fallacies or the incorrect thinking, let's say, that many photographers get into when they want to go pro or start charging for their work is they do, like I always say, like in the case of wedding photography, they will sort of do some spreadsheet math and back of the napkin math and say, if I charged this much money and I do 2 weddings every weekend, one on a Saturday, one on a Sunday, that equals this much money. And usually that number is a pretty big number, right? And they oh, well, that's more than I make today. I could just quit my job. And they move down that tangent. There's a lot of pitfalls and landmines with that thinking, though.
Yeah, well, the thing is as well, and those guys are feeling it. There are top level wedding photographers that charge enough to keep some people, food on the plate and roof over their head for a whole year for just one wedding. But on the other end of that, and this is what's happening in photography across the board, really. On the other end, there are people that are charging $100 a day for a wedding because all they want to do is make a bit of pocket money, and they're not necessarily doing a great job. I'm sure some are, but there are people that come in at the bottom end and basically are knocking out the value. The bottom is dropping out of the market.
Yeah.
But I would say that wedding photography is still one of those areas of photography where it's a specific occasion. You need a photographer there. And if you want to get it done properly, you need to pay a certain amount of money, and the value proposition is easier to see. Although I do realize that wedding photographers are hurting just like the rest of the photography industry.
Yeah.
But in my sort of chosen field, which is basically fine art, nature, and wildlife, and that sort of photography, I've watched the value of the image drop significantly over the years. I knew that this was the case even when I started, but I have a relatively large library of images in a stock agency. I'm actually working with a couple of different stock agencies, and although I'm still making enough to keep a roof over our heads some months, there are months when I'm virtually don't get a check.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to get paid when you do, but if you try to rely just on that, I would be living under a bridge, and I don't want to live under a bridge.
No.
So,
no, you don't.
and that's what's happening. There's a top layer of, I mean, we were talking on TWiP last week. You mentioned Joe McNally. Obviously, people that are at his level are still getting jobs. They're still being hired to do photography and get paid for that photography. Mm-hmm. In my situation, it was always about being. My business initially was built around the education of photography and workshops and tours where people pay me to go to a wonderful place, and I help them to make wonderful images. That was always going to be the main sort of pillar, the cornerstone of the business. But I also early on, I thought, well, that still is really me working for. I have to market the tours. The podcast was my marketing vehicle and my way to get credibility online. But I actually then still have to go and be there for those 12 days or so of the trip. Yeah. And I mean, fine, I'm not knocking that. I love the tours, but there's only one me, and there's only a certain amount of tours that I can fill each year. I can't really be on the road for more than 5 or 6 tours a year. At the moment, I'm doing 5, and I think that's the most that I can realistically do without putting too much strain on my relationship with my wife. And because I don't want to be divorced, I've got to think of other ways to make a living, to bring in income. And so, I mean, I've been doing prints. I sell fine art prints. I've got a huge big printer that I make up to 44 by 66 inch prints on that.
Wow.
And they, these things sell, but still, it's not enough alone to keep money on the table. So I've forever been trying to figure out how to create things that I can sell while I'm asleep. Yeah. I wake up and a few orders have come in. For example, quite a long time ago now, I decided that I needed a specific script that would run in Photoshop to put borders on my prints, because I was printing on large roll paper. But say, for example, I needed a 13 by 19 and I didn't have 13 by 19 inch print, sheet paper. I made these scripts. It took me an afternoon to throw some scripts together that worked in Photoshop. You run them and it adds a specific border with a specific offset. And I just thought, you know what, I've made these for me, but if I package these up, they'll probably sell.
Yeah.
And I've sold hundreds of these scripts, just $12 a pop.
Wow.
And every month, people keep buying it from me. And it's turned out to be, it was a bit of an eye opener for me. It was like, okay, if I make things that I need, then people will probably, I'm not making millions of sales. I'm not going to retire on the money from these things.
Yeah.
But if I create things that I need, people generally, someone else needs it. And I'm able to make a little bit more passive income. Those things, once I've done them, they're on my website. Another thing I'm going to just jump in and mention here is that, I mean, obviously, you remember our mutual friend, David Duchemin, he created Craft and Vision, really a company that made the ebook market. But then now everyone's giving ebooks away in exchange for an email address.
Right.
And the value of those has dropped, but some people still appreciate reading a good ebook. Yeah. The problem there is that it became unviable for David and Craft and Vision, so they actually closed their doors, or they reduced their shop right down to just a few select items of David's. And with that, they've given their authors the right to sell their ebooks. So,
wow. So you got yours back.
I've got my 3 Craft and Vision ebooks back, and I'm allowed to sell those from April 1st. And in this few months that Craft and Vision have not had their doors open, people have been emailing me saying, when is your printing book going to be available? When is your sharpshooter book going to be available? So, I mean, again, this is going to be another revenue stream that even the money, obviously, that came in from Craft and Vision, it was great money that was coming in. They were selling my books while I was asleep.
Yeah.
And all of this has helped me to remain viable. And it's helped me to keep a roof over my head. And And it gives you the freedom in many ways to not have to worry too much about bringing in every dollar directly from the act of either going out and doing photography for someone, or in my case, doing the tours or doing the education or the other types of workshops. I do consultation, I do all sorts of things. But the things that you have to work directly for every penny that comes in, there's only one you, and it's really limited. So
yeah, that's like in internet. Put on my internet marketing hat. In the internet marketing world, there's various modes of revenue generation, right? And you hit on most of them, right? So there's the dollars for hours modality, right? Where hey, I'll do this thing for you in exchange for some money, but it takes your physical presence to be there in order to do it, like shooting a wedding, for example. Yeah. And outside of the photography industry, you could stretch that out to, lawyers, doctors, all those folks, dentists. They are essentially just trading dollars for hours. They went to school, they got a skill, and now they're selling that skill and doing something, but they're only 24 hours in a day, and only a certain percentage of those hours can you spend making money. So you're automatically capped by how many hours you can do the thing and what the market rate is for the thing that you're doing. So you can do the formula and you can see how much money you can make as one person, which is why some doctors' offices expand and hire other doctors in there and take a cut of their salary so they can actually give themselves a raise. But the other revenue generating technique you talked about was the digital distribution method, which is what you're doing and which popularized by, let's say, iTunes, and Netflix. Is you build one digital asset and sell it and over and over and over again, and it just sells itself. You build a sales page for it, you put that asset up there in some way to generate revenue from it, or to take a credit card or PayPal or whatever. And like you said, it generates money while you sleep. And that's what you're doing. And then another way on top of that I don't think we talked about, was the subscription model, right? So the subscription model kind of is a hybrid of the digital distribution model, where people are paying a set amount of money for access to something. Like in the case of, say, TWiP PRO, the TWiP PRO community, there's a $4.99 subscription reoccurring fee. The benefit of subscription-based businesses, on the TWiP PRO notwithstanding, TWiP PRO, that little stipend was put in there just to eliminate the troll quotient, right? But it's still revenue. Like you said, it's another revenue stream, and it's reoccurring, which means it's predictable. So with a one-off digital distribution sale, like an ebook, and it's on your site, you're going to see sales while you sleep, but it's not predictable. With a subscription-based business or revenue stream, you can predict. I've got X hundred of members in the community times this amount. Then at the end of this month, I should end up with around this much. So then you can set targets and say, hey, I want to have a membership drive. I want to push it to, I want to get 500 members by this date, and then push that. So. And it's all just different methods. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. It's all just different methods, and it's based on what you do, what you want to do as a person and as a marketer, and as, in this case, as a photographer. But what you I want to switch gears a little bit, Martin, because you are like you said, you diversified in income streams, which is fantastic, but you are very smart, right? So you are very smart, and we're going to illustrate that in a second. So you got a wild hair a little while back, and you're like, I want to build an app. I want to build an iPhone or an iPad app, and granted, I haven't done it, so maybe it is very simple to do it. But when I look at it from the outside, it looks very complicated to build an app and distribute it and get it approved by Apple and all that stuff. But you decided you wanted to build one. So take me through that process, from that, where you were laying in bed at night staring at the ceiling and you said, I need an app, from that point to when you saw the first sale roll in from said app.
Yeah. Well, I basically, here in Japan, I reverse hibernate every summer. I'm out all through the winters, minus 20 or whatever, which is like, I don't know, in Fahrenheit, minus whatever.
Like 500.
Yeah. But then in the summertime here, and you lived in Japan, it's incredibly hot and sticky.
Yeah.
And I basically just stay indoors and turn the air conditioning on in the summer. So I like to find myself a project. I'm gonna make something each year, and it's usually something that ends up being something that I can sell and increase revenue streams. And last year, I had an app that someone made me back in 2010, and I'd bought it from them sort of a few years ago. But it was going to become obsolete with iOS 11, which was going to be 64-bit, and so my old app was going to basically be taken off the App Store. And although it wasn't making me a huge amount, I didn't want that to happen. So I decided to. I asked around about getting it upgraded or rebuilt by a few developers, and the money they wanted was way too much. And I thought, you know what, if that's the amount that they're going to charge, I'll just teach myself to do it and do it myself.
Yeah.
And I enjoy doing a lot of these things. I mean, I built my business around doing things that I love doing: traveling, printing, education. All of these things are things that I can get passionate about, and so it helps me to stay engaged. I've been a geek. I went to college here in Japan in the mid-90s to learn various computer skills. I've even got a certificate to say that I can use Photoshop 3, I think it is.
Wow. Hey, that's when layers were introduced.
It was like, I've still got it in a little binder somewhere, a clear file thing. So I'm relatively technical, and I thought, you know what, I probably can do this. I looked online. I spent like $26 at sale price for a Udemy, was that udemy.com, I think it is.
Yeah, Udemy.
It was just an iOS 11 Swift 4. Let me see, it was a lady called Angela Yu from the UK, I believe, and it was an amazing course. It took me about 10 days. I had to carve out a slice of time. Obviously had to do other things in the meantime, but I spent about 10 days online going through these courses and basically teaching myself with the help of this course to program for iOS.
That's crazy.
And I mean, it wasn't after those 10 days, I'd got a really good foundation, and I was looking online for code snippets and various things, but I was able to then jump in. And I quickly realized, opening the code of my old app, that it was an old programming language, and I was going to have to just basically rebuild it from scratch. So I didn't try to update my old app, but I did take a lot of the ideas. And it used to have, the most popular part of my old app was a depth of field calculator. So I jumped in and looked at the code, and I could figure out some of the math for the basic how that worked. But then, basically after that, I got it ready. I added an ND calculator so that you could figure out how much each ND filter, neutral density filter, will affect your shutter speed when you put one on the front of your lens. And I added a bunch of other stuff, and I got something that I thought was going to work. I tested it relatively thoroughly. In my old life, I used to manage test engineer teams, and so I'd got all of this stuff that I figured out. Okay, I'm going to need a test case. I'm going to have to run it in various, like an upgrade scenario and a clean install scenario.
Yeah,
did all of that, drawing on past experience. But then, it passed. I didn't think that it was going to pass, but I'd obviously been careful enough in how I coded it that Apple. They approved it first time. I was so cool. Really nervous. I was like, this is the first app I'm ever going to send into Apple. And
how long does it take? How long does it take for them to approve it?
They're pretty quick at the moment. I pretty much every time I've done an update, they have approved it overnight. So I drop it into the system before I go to bed here in Japan. And then when I get up 8 hours later, it's approved. So, wow. And that's basically me using the time zones, because obviously in Cupertino or wherever the team that tests them is and approves them is, they're probably working just their regular day while I'm asleep, and I get up and it's approved. So, I mean, that was great. So the thing is that there was, you know, it's a relatively complicated app. I mean, I can show you.
Yeah, you have it up on the screen there. Let's take a look at it while you and take us through it, because you described it well. Before you bring it up on the screen, what was the duration of time that it took you to put that app together? Like, how long did it take to go from flowchart? I'm assuming you flowcharted it and then executed it. How long did it take to go from flowchart to working app on a phone?
I think it was about 6 weeks. 2 weeks to learn to basically figure out how to code it, how to code for iOS. But then another 4 weeks of tearing my hair out trying to figure out how to get things done. I mean, one thing that I really wanted to do was I wanted the app to be able to flip from, and I'll show you this. I'll show you this here rather than, if I can, I'll show you this quickly. So if you turn the screen, it will flip properly, and it fits.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it fits really well on an iOS, on an iPad, and let's see. I think I'll just need to. Yeah, this should still be recording. So it flips across. Okay, I'll send you the video for this, but
okay.
It adjusts for iOS. It works on all screen sizes, but I also wanted it to quite, let's see, say gracefully go from horizontal to portrait orientations and things like that.
Yeah.
And it all sort of lays out. But that was quite complicated to do. And I wanted to do that. I mean, it must have taken me an extra week just to figure
just for the orientation change.
Yeah, so that it would actually do that gracefully and relay out on all screens without having to make different copies of the app and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was probably about 6 weeks from when I first started the course until I submitted the app. I think it was about 6 weeks.
Wow, that's not bad. And it obviously is generating revenue now, right? So I'm assuming it's paid for that Swift course that you took, right?
Well, the Swift course was $26, so I probably made that in the first few hours, which was nice.
Oh, wow, nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's not, like I say, it's not one of these things that I'm going to retire on just yet. But I actually, my next project that I'm hoping to do is to port it for Android, because as much as, I mean, I love my Apple products and I'm a fanboy, but I do realize that there's actually I mean, if you look at the statistics, they say that there's like 9 times more Android users than there are iOS users.
It is. So, Android is the most popular operating system on the planet. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it will make sense for me to port this to Android, and that's my next job that I've got to do. And then hopefully I'll be making like 10 times or 9 times more than I am off the app now.
So that means you'll be buying a Windows machine and an Android cell phone and an Android tablet, right?
You know what? I might have to buy an Android device, but I've been looking into there's a piece of code, and I forget, not a piece of code, an application that actually just ports iOS apps directly to Android. And if it's as simple as their marketing blurb would have you think, it's probably not going to be that big a job.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, Martin, and say that it's not going to be as simple as being a marketer and knowing that marketers can paint a rosy picture, and then you'll get in there and like, oh, we meant in this specific use case using this specific Android phone, So yeah. So
was it Seth Godin that did the book All Marketers Are Liars?
All marketers are liars, and Purple Cow and all that. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah. Let's do a quick demo because I still want to jump into the conversation on diversification of incomes and dive into that a little bit. But let's see what you got.
Okay, so I'm going to so here we've got the, when you start the app up, the first screen that you'll see is the depth of field calculator. And you can go through, this is on an iPad Pro, so the screens are actually, they're not quite the same as they look on a phone. But the main 2 calculators is the DOF calculator and the ND calc. And then there's some links to various stuff to help you sort of understand what's happening. And then there's a few help screens. You can go through and actually just get some help on a lot of this stuff.
Cool.
But the main two things, it's calculators for photographers in the field. And again, these are the sort of things that I use myself. And that's why I decided that I wanted these. But you crank it up, and over here you've got the formats. If you use a 4/3 camera, you just select the sensor format here. I'm going to leave it at 35 millimeters. Then you select your aperture, what focal length you're at. Say I'm shooting at 35 millimeters, and then roughly how far it is to your, say your subject is, let's say they're 25 feet away. So then you can switch between, if there's a button here, and the blue, anything blue is basically got a feature. So if there's a focus feet and meters, if you tap that, it switches between the two. And then once you've got that, you've got the readout. I don't think you can actually see this, but it tells you the focus distance which you've set.
Yeah.
But then it tells you the depth of field, how many feet or meters you have of focus. And then if you press this hyperfocal distance button, the other blue button there, it will actually set the feet to the hyperfocal distance for your settings. But this is based on the traditional depth of field calculations, which is based on viewing an 8x10 print at arm's length.
Right.
So what I did was after the first version, I started to dream up, and I mean, this is me. I was terrible at maths at school, but I started to think about how this was being calculated, and I wanted to make it so that I could use this and then come back to a computer and view the images at 100% on a computer and still see everything sharp between 17 and 17.38 feet and infinity. Mm-hmm. So I added what I called the pixel peeper mode. And if you go to the settings screen, turn on pixel peeper, and down here I've got the 50 megapixels is my 5DS. Mm-hmm. And then when you've done that, you'll see that let's just turn this off and on again. So you'll see that the hyperfocal distance has now changed, and the depth of field is actually shorter. It's shallower. But that's because I now want to calculate this based on looking at the image at 100% on the screen and not an 8x10 print at arm's length.
Oh, very cool.
And so I figured all of that out, and then I thought, well, you know what? That actually gives me the ability to calculate. So over here, you can see we've got a new button, a new highlighted button, which is the pixel pitch. Mm-hmm. So I'm calculating the pixel pitch from the information that we have. And if you tap that, you can see that you're at 50 megapixels just to check. But that gives me the ability to then calculate whether we're going to be diffraction limited, which is where pushing light through a small hole makes it spread out on the other side more, and lenses can become diffraction limited. And you see now that we've got some green. We've got the airy disc readout. The size of the airy disc is now there. And this green means that you're not diffraction limited. But if I go to F8, it actually is telling me that on paper, it's telling me that I've got a possibility. This is a warning. It's like the traffic lights. So green for go, and then amber to say, okay, you want to be thinking about diffraction now. But then when you get to like F16, it goes red and it says, okay, now you are diffraction limited.
Oh, that is so cool.
I've actually done some checks. I mean, this is on paper. This is exactly the numbers that I start to think about. You need to really check your lenses because all lenses are different, and a kit lens is going to behave differently to a Canon's L lens, for example. But it's a guide for showing you when you want to think about these things. And there's other stuff that you can actually type in your own circle of confusion type, which is something else. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what these things mean, then I've got a link in here to take you to my website and talk about just basically tell you what the circle of confusion is. So there's some pretty heavy stuff in here. but you can get over and find information on that. The other cool thing, because of the way I did it, I actually can. The app supports.
Oh, nice! Look at that
split screen, so I can actually go over and read up on it while changing the settings, and so it's I put a lot of thought into that sort of stuff.
That's fantastic. What's the price of that app, Mark?
I think it's $3.99. I put it up initially at $2.99 to help people get on, to get into it. But
$399? Are you mad?
$3.99. So it's $4 basically.
Yeah.
So, but then the other thing that I did, and we'll just quickly look at this. This is another thing that I wanted. It was not in the original app. None of the diffraction warnings or everything was in the original app either. But I did want to make an ND filter calculator, and so this is basically you take your say you're on a sunny day, you're at 250th of a second, and you want to make the waterfall look a little bit silky, so you'll try an ND8 filter, and it tells you that gives you a 30th of a second. But you've also got a 6-stop filter, that'll take you to a 1/4 of a second. That's probably a little bit better. And then you can go in, and it tells you right here we've got some filters are hidden, and you can unhide them or hide them. If you don't have a 16-stop filter, for example, just swipe across and it'll disappear from the list and tell you how many filters you've got hidden. But then, I often in Japan, in overcast skies, I'll often be working at around a 60th of a second without any filters. And then I will stick on, say, a 10-stop filter. It'll give me 16 seconds. And then I'll add an 8-stop to give me a 2-minute exposure. And if you want to, you can start a timer and it'll just go away and do that for you.
That's taking all the guesswork out of basically what you're doing, right?
I use this in the field. It's my way of just quickly calculating the new shutter speeds. So and it's that's really the main part, the main features.
Cool.
But that's what it is. That's what it does.
That's very cool. Congratulations on that, man. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I can definitely tell you put a lot of work into it and pulled out some hair probably on the math side of things. Right? Yeah. But so I'll put a link to that in the description for this video and on the blog post, et cetera, so people can go download that and play around with it. But let's switch gears and talk about the diversification of income piece of this, because your app is one piece of your income. Let's call it tree, right? Or your root system. So you've got the app, you've got the workshops, you got stock photo sales, one-off photo sales. What else? What else makes up the constellation that is Martin Bailey?
I've got a number of things. I mean, you did mention subscriptions. I've not a lot of people subscribing, but I have a desktop wallpaper thing where I just prepare one of my photos, usually a recent photo, and email blasted out to people that are subscribing to that. I mean, that's like $24 a year, but it's a subscription model. Like you were saying, it's something that you once people are signed up, they pretty much can stay on there. And even if they don't, I know that it's money that I've got that's in, and then I just have to fulfill by every month, making sure I've got a new desktop wallpaper photo goes out to people that are subscribed to that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, consultation, I do portfolio reviews for people and consultation on sometimes just business. People ask me about the sort of stuff that we're talking about now. But I, really diversified just by creating a lot of different things. I think we've covered most of them. Yeah.
Well, so in the mindset of the photographer that's starting, and they're like, you know what, I feel like I have the chops to make some money doing, around this stuff. So like we were saying in the beginning, the incorrect thinking is you're just going to jump in and start making 6 figures from your photography. That may happen, but it's not the norm. A better, as we're saying in this interview, a better way of thinking of it is diversification. So if someone moves down that route and they're like, okay, I get it. I need to have diversified. I need to diversify my revenue streams. Then what? Right. So what should they do? Because I would. When people ask me similar questions, I always start with an email list. I always say, you got to have an email list, but I already have 1,000 followers on Facebook. Won't that suffice? I don't know. You tell me, Martin. What do you think?
Yeah, email lists, that's obviously a very important part of this. And I've made a number of decisions over the last 12 years that have in some ways limited my reach. But it's given me an audience that I value much more. And one of them was that when I started to collect email addresses, people will subscribe to my newsletters.
Yeah.
I don't just give me your email address, because I want to personalize it. I don't even want just the name, because then you've got to try and figure out which is the first name. I actually ask people to enter the first name in one field, the second name, the surname in the second field, and then their email address. And that puts some people off. Some people don't want to give me that amount of information.
Right.
But if they trust me as a content creator and as a photographer and as an educator, they're generally happy to do that.
Sure.
So I can then take that, and when I send out email, it goes to Frederick. It's not going to go to just, hey, Frederick at wherever.
Yeah.
It's going, and so I can personalize things better by that. But it's given me.
I think on that. Sorry to interrupt you, but I think on that, there are no right and wrong ways for well, there are, but generally speaking, there's no one formula for how you accept email addresses. And I was doing that, what you're saying. Excuse me. I was doing that in the beginning, where I would, first name, last name, email. And for that very reason, so when I send out messages, I can have a variable in the greeting or salutation field and say, "Hey, Martin," and then the message, and then at the end, "Thanks, Martin. I hope to see," and it seemed like that would be for me. It seemed like that was much more personal, like you said. But then I was thinking, and I came to the conclusion personally that it was. Like, as people mature and as the market matures and people understand how email works, and and they know that they're on a list, it for me, it almost felt like when I get an email and I'm on a list and it says, "Hey, Frederick," or "Hey, Frederick Van," or whatever, I always feel like, I feel like, this is for me, it feels like they're making an attempt to be personal, but they're not, it's not really personal. They're not really writing. They're not really talking to me, even though they're pretending to be talking to me. So as a result, the emails I send out, I don't do that. And I capture email. The mail list program I use is called MailChimp, and it captures other data on the back end, like IP address and some other kinds of data that it can capture when people subscribe. So I can do things based on geography and things like that, because I have the IP address. But in terms of the message itself, it's always, I'm making, as a marketer, I'm making the assumption that the person reading it knows that they're on a list, and they know that I don't know that you're John, So, and I'm just sending you some information that you might want to know about real quick. And, and that's it. I don't know. It's an interesting split.
You've got better marketing chops than I have, so I mean that's probably the way to do it. But the thing the reason I brought that up was because because I was asking for that little bit of extra information, it's given me a list of people that are more connected to me. I mean, I have like 70% open rate on my emails and things like that.
That's great, yeah.
And that's relatively high, and so I use MailChimp as well. I was talking to the people at MailChimp when I was in the US 5 years or so ago. And they were saying that, that I think at the time I'd got a 70 or 80% open rate. And they were saying that's really good and I think it's the way I've built the list.
Yeah.
So for me, that was one thing. I believe the other thing that I've done that I believe has probably limited my reach is calling my podcast the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. This Week in Photo is going to be more appealing because people aren't going to be thinking it's me talking about my photos.
Yeah.
But in my case, it was always about building a brand around me as the educator, but not necessarily about my photos. You know, I talk about all sorts of things, and people that get into it, once they get over the fact that it's not just me talking about me or my photos, then they will. I think we develop a relatively good relationship, and I've become personal friends with a lot of people that I've connected with. So, and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a few things that I've done that I might have done differently if I wanted to reach a wider audience. But I think the audience that I have managed to create has been pretty good, and it's helping to support my way of life now. I can send out an email. I get a cancellation 2 weeks before a tour. I can send out an email, and if I leave the inventory open, I would get more people trying to book that spot than I can. I have to limit it.
That's fantastic.
You know, I can basically refill a space from my list relatively easily because there's a lot of people on there that want to travel with me, and it's great. The dangerous thing about talking about this is that we do want your audience to understand that if you do build a company that does similar things to what I'm doing, you're not necessarily going to have the same success instantly. I mean, people ask me for, like, what's the magic bullet? How do you do it? One guy, I remember when you first asked me to come on TWiP. I think I'd been doing my own podcast for 6 or 7 years, and I'd got enough of a history and an online presence that you thought I was worth calling onto your show. Right. And then a few weeks later, some guy emailed me and said, I've decided that I would like to be on TWiP, or I've targeted TWiP as a podcast that I would like to guest on, and this and that and the other. And he said, how do you think, you know, is it possible for me to get on there? And I said, well, I don't know. Try doing a podcast of your own for 7 years and developing some chops, and then you can possibly hope that Frederick will get in touch. You know, it's like, I've decided I want to do it, but people don't want to do the work. Right. And so you have to be realistic in that there's a lot of hard work that goes into building a big enough audience that will support you in the sort of things that we're doing. And just sort of throwing out your shingles or whatever, hanging your shingles out, is that what they say? And hoping that it will float is probably going to be a little bit disappointing. And that's why I always also recommend that people try, if possible, to build a business and to get the brand established while you're still getting paid for doing something else. Right. That's how I did it. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, it's human nature, right? I mean, human nature in the case of that guy, it's physics, right? It's the path of least resistance. Right? We're always seeking the path of least resistance, and sorry about that. And we see, like, we'll seek the path of least resistance, and we'll like try to model ourselves and say, hey, look, it's Martin Bailey. If Martin can do it, and Martin looks, you know, I feel like I'm up here with Martin, so I can do that too, right? Completely discounting all the things that happened on the road to getting to where you are. Like, I was having a conversation with Joseph Lenashke, who's, you know, Joseph, right? So Joseph, so Joseph is doing this whole live streaming thing and all that. And he makes it look so easy, right? I mean, he makes it look like butter, like, oh, I could do that in my sleep, right? And then, you know, he's consulted with me a lot on how to do the things that I'm doing. And he, you know, as you get into this stuff, there's a lot of intricacies that go into the back end that you don't see on the front end. It's like an iceberg. You see a little bit of it, and then underneath it, there's all this craziness going on. And then, in the case of this stuff, like you're saying with the guy that contacted you, there's, you know, you see, oh, there's Martin. He's on there. I can go get a mic like that, and I could, you know, all I need is the contact. I need Frederick's email address, and I'll be on TWiP, right? And that's the way it goes. So people seek the path of least resistance, and they always think things are more or simpler than they look, especially if someone skilled at doing it is doing it, and they make it look simple. So. hey, look at Joe McNally. He just goes out there in 10 minutes. He takes some great photos and gets paid a gazillion dollars from. I could do that. I'm going to go get the same camera he has and the same Nikon strobes he has. And I'm going to be the new Joe McNally, completely discounting all the scar tissue that Joe McNally has built up to get to be Joe McNally.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into this stuff. And on the business side as well, I think, and you tell me what you think, Martin. I think you have to diversify, but at the same time, you have to have a thirst for learning, doing new things, right? Because if you're just in this for money, like I want to become a photographer because I want to make money and do all this stuff, then I think your chances of success are lower than if you just love photography and you would do it even if you weren't getting paid. You just love it, and you want to, you want to learn Photoshop, and here's Capture One. Now I want to learn that thing, and then it gives you a reason to do things, right? Because you're doing it because you love doing it, and then you try to monetize on top of that. It makes much more sense. So I don't know. I mean, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I decided from the word go that I would not take jobs that I didn't want to do. And it was always going to be about me building in things that I love doing to my business. And I mean, I turn down jobs all the time. I mean, a very famous company emailed me a job proposition a few months ago. They wanted a whole bunch of photos doing here in Tokyo. But they needed model releases from everyone that's recognizable. This is Tokyo. They wanted like rush hour photos. Nobody's going to stop for it. I would need a team of maybe at least 20 people with clipboards and model releases. And the chances of getting one from everyone that was recognizable are up like zero.
Yeah.
And this,
it's like at a busy intersection in Shinjuku or something,
exactly.
Right?
And it was 3 days work, and they wanted to pay like $2,000. I'm saying, okay, so $2,000 will get you probably until a day and a half in just for me. But I need a production crew with me to get that. I need people with clipboards. I need this, and this. That $2,000 is probably going to get you like maybe the first shoot, and that's it.
Right.
Right. And I just said, thanks for thinking of me, but go and find someone else that can do this.
Right.
And I honestly think nobody can do it, not for the money that they're offering. And even if they offered $10,000, it wouldn't be enough because you couldn't do the job. It was unrealistic. But people have, over the years, I mean, I started this business thinking that I was going to do more portraiture. And, I had a number of clients that, very, very loyal clients that I did every year. And I loved photographing them, but there was like 4 or 5 of them that were people that understood the value proposition. Sure. And people that are just coming along to a website saying, "Oh, I need portraits taken," and then they look at the price and it's like, "Well, this is too much. I can go to the portrait studio down the street and get one for a tenth of that." Fine, if that's what you want, go there, because that's your consumer portraits. If you want something else, if you want a little bit extra, then come to me. Right. And I just got that sort of work and the sort of offers that I was getting that I just talked about with the unrealistic propositions. I just got to the point where I thought, you know what, I'm not even enjoying these conversations. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be. I'm trying to let people know why it's going to cost them X amount of money, and people just don't get it. Nobody's got the budget anymore. And I just thought, you know what, I'm not even going to market myself as doing this work anymore. And I started to just do more of the stuff that I love. Programming for iOS, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process. On TWiP recently, we were talking about the fact that I'm doing a lot of my own music now. I love making music.
Yeah, I see that keyboard back there.
Well, when I did a marketing video for my Hokkaido landscape tour that we ran last year, which incidentally in the first 5 days filled up 2 years of future tours.
That's crazy.
I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do the music myself. And I've been doing this for a while, but I composed the music and created it. I mean, I don't know if you can even see on that screen behind me, but there's all of those little squares on that screen are all little pieces of music that I play in a certain way.
Yeah.
And they it makes a score for a 10-minute video, and the ebb and the flow and the way it changes tempo, the way it changes the mood is all tailored for the video. We switch to a certain scene and it goes off to these big swelling sort of
that's
pads
cool.
that you call it. And so basically, I mean, I have built something into my business that I love doing.
Yeah.
And printing,
and that's the name of the game.
Yeah,
that's the name
all of
the
this
game.
stuff. And so I made that decision. I was going to do stuff that I love, and when you do stuff you love, you hit it out of the park every time. If you're working for someone on, you're not getting the amount of money that you want, there's always a little bit of resentment behind that. And I think there's a lot to be said for just saying, no, please go and find someone else that wants to work for peanuts. I want to work for what I feel my value is. And then when you walk into the job, you're happy, you whack it out of the park, and you're producing work that the customers are going to love, or the clients are going to love a lot more. And I think it's just so much to be said for doing things that you are happy to do, that you enjoy doing, and doing them for a price that makes you happy doing it.
Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time, but I want to end this on the. You brought up a really important topic, and that's the art of saying no, right? And a lot of photographers, I would argue, not just photographers, people in all industries in their personal and professional lives have, depending on the person, obviously, but it's hard to say no. Right. And it's hard to balance all these different opportunities that are coming at you from every direction. And you don't want to say no because you don't want to burn a bridge. But you just like try to overload yourself and make everyone happy. Or you end up taking on jobs that you shouldn't have taken on because you're ill-suited for that particular job, or you don't have time, therefore you don't give it the right amount of you into it. So talk about that a little bit, Martin. How do you, because I'm sure you're inundated with opportunities every day. What's the best way to say no? What's the best way to turn them down and move forward with the stuff that you want to do and are good at doing?
When I first started working in the corporate environment, I was very sort of aggressive in my communication. If I thought someone had said something that rubbed me up the wrong way, I would just tell them and rip into them. And I soon realized, partly through some of the training that I got when I was working for that Florida-based company here in Tokyo, I learned that, telling people exactly what you think is not always the best way to go about doing business. You have to be a little bit more tactful. And so when I'm turning a job down, I will explain the reasons, but I'll do it hopefully in a polite way and in a professional way, and just say, thank you for thinking of me. I really appreciate the fact that you thought of asking, but it really isn't for me. And I think you'd probably be better served by trying to find someone else for this job.
Yes, perfect.
And I really do feel that for me, the biggest thing is people say you seem to succeed in whatever you do. And it's not that. If I was to try to, decide that I wanted to fly unmanned to the sun with some wax wings, it's probably not going to go well.
That was very random, Icarus.
Yeah. So, but I not unmanned, but without a machine, unaided.
Yeah.
But I would. What I do is I think whether or not I want to do something, and if I decide that I want to do something, I know that there's a way that I can make it happen. And so it's really all about whether or not I want to do something, and if it's there, if the desire to do something is there, I know that I'll find a way. And I mean, I'm also a stubborn SOB. I mean, my wife looks at me sometimes and she's like, "You've been trying to figure out how to make that little bit of code work on the iOS app. You've been trying to figure out how to make that work for a week now. Why don't you just pay someone to do it?" I'm like, "What? I've come this far. I'm this close to getting the skills to do this.
Sure.
I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to make it my own."
Yeah.
And it's because I want to do it. I want to see an app that I created in the App Store. I want to see people enjoying it. I mean, luckily at the moment, I'm getting 5-star reviews. Everyone that's reviewed it has given me 5 stars. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah.
And it's because I did it with my heart. I did it all from me, and with the passion that I do everything that I decide to do with.
And that's key, right?
Yeah.
That is
don't
key.
do things I know I'm not going to be passionate about.
Right. But the other piece of that, you hit on another. You keep hitting on these good topics. I love this. That's why I love it when we talk. In internet marketing or in online, we talked about the whole idea of dollars for hours and that you can only do so much in a day. But then there's a concept of outsourcing. And like you hit on, like your wife was saying, why don't you just have somebody else do that for you, right? Which makes a lot of sense. If you just look at the back of the napkin math and you're like, well, my hourly rate, like, for example, what you charge for consulting, if you say, well, my consulting fee is X and, it's going to take me 7 hours to do this thing, 7 hours times X equals I'm hiring somebody else to do it for me. That math seems to make sense, but it doesn't always work out that way, right? Because when you hire people to do things for you, very rarely do they do it exactly to the level of quality that you think that thing deserves. So you end up with something relatively, left of what you wanted to begin with. So the question is, and maybe this is unanswerable, I don't know. So take it as a hypothetical or a real question if you want. But how do you draw the line between, what you're gonna do yourself and what you're gonna let other people do? Like with your printing, for example, you print your own photos. You could very easily send them out to, Bay Photo or White House or whatever and get them printed. Why do you, where do you draw the line between what you're going to do and what you're going to push out the door?
I outsource one task, and that's accounting. And the reason I do that is because I don't like accounting.
Yeah.
I don't understand a lot of the intricacies of Japanese tax law. And for me, it's just so much better to ask. I've got an amazing accountant, cost me $300 a month, and then a couple of $1,000s at the end of the year when we submit lots of things to the government. He probably saves me more money than I actually pay him because of all of the things that he knows that we can actually do.
Yeah.
But it comes down to the same thing, really. It's what I enjoy doing. If I enjoyed accounting, I'd be doing my own accounting as well. Mm-hmm. There are things. I've got a couple of products that physical products that I want to bring to the market over the next few years, and I can't make them myself. They're going to be things that I'm going to have to work with a third party. It's going to be, actually fabricated, created in some facility somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's because that's not my core competence. I'm not able to physically do some of the things that I want to do. That will be outsourced. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily because I don't want to do it, but it's going to be, hopefully, if these products actually do come to market, there'll be things that I'll be the brains behind, but the actual production is going to have to be outsourced.
Yeah.
And so everything else, if I can do it myself and there's enough of me to go around, I will always try to do it myself and just enjoy the process. If I don't enjoy the process, I'll either not do it or I will try to figure out a way of outsourcing it, just like I do with my accounting.
Yeah. Well, Martin, this has been a fantastic conversation, man. As usual, I feel like there's like 3 other conversations that need to happen between you and I that are spinoffs of this conversation.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. So tell me, where can people go to get your app, sign up for your workshops, check out the ebooks in April when they're available, or even get some consulting from you? Where's the nexus of Martin Bailey?
Everything that you just mentioned, thank you. Everything that you mentioned is at martinbaileyphotography.com. It's all in the top toolbar there. The next tour that I've got lined up is Namibia. That's been sold out for a while. I've got Morocco coming up in November. That's going to be a great trip, and we've got a few spaces left on that one. And then, I've got all sorts, and it's all linked. If you hit on tours, click on the tours and workshops button there, or the shop button, you can get to the app from the shop button. It's all there. So just look at the menu at the top of martinbaileyphotography.com.
Awesome. Very cool. I have one request though for a tour stop for your workshops, if you wouldn't mind. There's a city in Africa, you may not have heard of it. It's called Wakanda. So
yes. Yeah.
And I hear they have some vibranium souvenirs. Or
You know what? I've just been watching. Excuse me. I've just been watching your conversation with Chris, and I absolutely loved it. I've got the last 10 minutes to watch after we finished, but I'm heading into town this afternoon. I mean, just your conversation and just, some of the topics that you hit on was really, really, a lot of what you were saying at the beginning there was quite moving.
Yeah.
And but then your opinions about the movie and everything. I'm going to see if my wife will go and watch it with me this afternoon.
Yeah, go check it out.
We've got a new movie theater here in town.
I would love to hear what you think about that movie. I'd love to hear your opinion.
Looks great.
Both from a movie standpoint and also from a cinematic, artistic standpoint. What you think about it?
One thing I've got to mention this.
Sure.
I watched Blade Runner 2049 a few weeks ago. That was a huge, I'm thinking Blade Runner, probably my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah.
Why did they have to ruin it with that that sequel?
I agree. I was expecting much more from Blade Runner than it was beautiful. It was beautifully done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very beautifully done.
It was just so weak.
It was very weak. It could have been. And I thought it was me, so I'm glad you said that, because I thought it was me, because I was thinking it was like, really? That's it? Because I think they tried to be too deep. Like at a certain level, you try to make people think it's like, Inception. You like too many layers of thinking in there. Okay, he's a robot. He's not a robot. That's his dad. That's who create. All of these things. And when you really, not that we want Michael Bay style Transformer, brain dead, hit him over the head with a rock kind of movies, but at the same time, if you make them too intricate, too deep, we go to the movies to be entertained, not to, not for that much exercise of the brain. And then, like you said, the Blade Runner franchise was, that was groundbreaking. It kicked off that kind of serious genre of science fiction for a lot of people, right? Like, science fiction can be well done, and they did it. And now, who knows if there'll be another Blade Runner.
Yeah. Well, I was relatively disappointed. Like you said, beautiful movie. The cinematography was amazing, and they're absolutely beautiful to watch, but didn't quite hold my attention as much as I would have liked. Yeah. But anyway, that's off topic.
All right. Well, yeah. I need to start there needs to be another podcast on breaking down the cinematography in movies. I think that that could have legs. Yeah. Cool. Or like sneak into movies and do a live stream outside of the theater after the movie and give thoughts.
Yeah. That'd be great.
That'd be cool. All right, Martin, I'll let you go. Let me know what you think of Black Panther. I'm really interested to hear what you see, and or hear about what you think of the movie. And also, listeners and watchers of this video, make sure you check out martinbaileyphotography.com. Head up there, click the menu items, and learn more about what this guy's doing, and support him by purchasing that app too, as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode of This Week in Photo. You know what I always say at the end of these shows? It's time to take that lens cap off. This is TWiP.